Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. And welcome to the World Green Building Council's Be Bold on Buildings webinar. Thank you for joining us. We'll just get started slowly as I know people are getting settled. Okay, and let's get started. Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Katrina Brady, and I'm the Programme and Strategy Director at the World Green Building Council. Welcome to the second webinar in our Be Bold on Buildings webinar series, which we have set up to help us accelerate towards COP30, taking place this year in November in Belém, Brazil. And today's session is going to be focused on mitigation in motion, and focus on the most urgent climate imperative, which is reducing emissions across the building and construction sector. Just before we begin, I'd like to say a couple of words about the World Green Building Council network, whose role is to help the property and construction markets around the world. We're proud to convene the world's largest action network, which has been working for over 20 years in accelerating the green building transition. We're now thrilled to be able to represent our 75 national Green Building Council members who are driving local action around the world, their 48,000 members, and over 70 other partner organisations. This is why we've launched our Be Bold on Building webinar series, to shine a light on the work that's already happening and to invite you to learn from it and to be part of scaling it. In today's session, we're going to focus on how the global network's already delivering on the topic that I've introduced, mitigation, which I'll say a little more about in a second. And we want to give you a bit of context about where we are in this time of year as we lead up to the most important climate conference, COP30. We're also going to be learning today from some expert speakers who I will introduce in just a second. But first, as I'm sure we're all aware, the responsibility for this sector in tackling climate change is massive. The built environment is responsible for around a third of energy-related carbon emissions, and we're expected to keep building the equivalent floor areas of the size of Paris every week until 2050. However, to put a positive spin on things, we do have market-ready solutions, and buildings provide over 40% of the solutions needed to double energy intensity improvements by 2030. And according to the IEA, energy efficiency and electrification are two of the key mitigation measures for tackling climate change. So although we're looking at mitigation as a whole, energy efficiency and electrification are where we're going to focus the conversation a little bit more today. Also, a really key topic for us, and we'll dive into with our speakers, is the role of policy, government leadership and finance, which we really cannot overstate in this transition. It's one of the reasons for why we're driving this conversation now in the lead up to COP30. Building energy performance codes are among the most effective tools for curbing operational emissions, yet around half of new global construction is being taken place in areas that are not covered by building codes currently. So we do have a big gap there, and we need bolder policies and increased investment to scale these solutions. So I've mentioned COP30, and this year's COP really does mark a critical turning point. It's the moment in which countries are going to come to this conference with updated nationally determined contributions, which are each country's own action plan, and they reflect, hopefully, the urgency and the ambition that has been set by the global stocktake. The stocktake has made it really clear that if we have any chance at all at hitting 1.5 degrees of warming as our target, we must triple renewable energy capacity, double energy efficiency, and move decisively away from fossil fuels. And these are just a few of the specific goals which have been set by the global stocktake. As you can see on screen, they also include things like increasing resilience and accelerating zero and low emission technologies. We're really thrilled in the World Green Building Council to work with a network who are at the forefront of engaging with the built environment sector and who are going to be able to deliver on the actions that governments commit to in their NDCs. And today we're going to be showcasing you some examples from partners of ours, from the Green Building Council of Australia, from industry leaders who are out in the network and implementing scalable solutions and taking action towards achieving these goals. So whether you're here with us today live or whether you're watching this on the recording, we hope that you can take away some clarity on the practical solutions that are delivering measurable emissions, confidence in the awareness that scaling these solutions is feasible and essential, and hopefully a little bit inspired to take bold steps in your own role. As we move towards COP30, we want to be really clear that the era of ambition is behind us and the era of implementation is here. So as we move through this Be Build on Buildings webinar series, we're making the business case and the people case for why sustainable buildings are at the heart of climate action. So as you listen today, we hope you are inspired and also learn, but you can also get involved. And I'm going to give you a bit more information about how you can show our support in advance of COP30 through our business action statement. And I'll give you more details on that at the end of this session. But for now, it's my very great pleasure to introduce our speaker panel, who have been very kindly waiting in the wings. And we're going to be hearing from each of our esteemed speakers individually. They're going to kick off with a brief presentation, and then we're going to have a panel discussion. So as you hear the speakers, if you have questions for them, please do submit them while they're speaking in the chat or the Q&A box. We've got a team online to be monitoring that, and we will weave in some of the questions that you ask in our panel discussion in the second half of this session. So without any further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce, first of all, Taryn Cornell. Taryn is the Senior Manager for Strategy and Development at the Green Building Council of Australia. So Taryn, thank you for dialing in so late this evening. Taryn's role at GBCA includes the ongoing development of Green Star, an internationally recognised rating standard driving healthy, resilient, positive buildings and places. Developed for the Australian environment, Green Star has certified thousands of sustainable fit-outs, new and existing buildings, homes and communities across the country. Taryn and her team also develop thought leadership, practical guides and discussion papers on topics such as electrification, upfront carbon and circularity. So we're thrilled to have her here.
Thanks so much, Katrina.
Thank you. Second, I'll just introduce Jan Quint, who is a smart infrastructure and senior sales enablement specialist at Siemens. Jan leads sales enablement for the higher education vertical at Siemens Smart Infrastructure. With over 20 years of experience in sales and customer engagement, he's passionate about helping universities become more sustainable and future ready through innovative technology and strategic partnerships. Welcome, Jan.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least, we have Maria Fernandez, who's the Head of Sustainability at Multiplex. Maria has over 15 years experience driving sustainability within the built environment in the UK and abroad. In her current role, Maria is responsible for all aspects of environmental and social sustainability, including delivery of the 2030 strategies, One Decade to Act, Multiplex's roadmap to decarbonisation, and Leave No One Behind, their social equity strategy. Maria is also a Vice Chair of the World Green Building Council's Corporate Advisory Board. Maria, welcome.
Thank you very much for the intro, Katrina.
Thank you. So we look forward to hearing from Jan and Maria in just a minute, but for now, it's my pleasure to hand over to Taryn. Taryn, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, and yeah, thanks everyone for having me. So I'm going to run you through the work that we've done through GBCA in Australia to essentially lay the foundations and the pathway towards electrification for the built environment. Next slide, please. So if we start at why electrification, essentially there's a number of these key factors. So the International Energy Agency's Net Zero by 2050 report identified electrification as the biggest contributor to meeting our net zero goals, higher than energy efficiency, which I think was a surprise to everyone at the time. Investors and finance increasingly have sustainability goals, and that's wrapped up into the kind of sustainability bonds and green loan products that they provide. Health and safety, induction cooking is addressing a lot of health and safety concerns that gas cooking can create. And also it's the fastest pathway. So we already have a grid built. All of our buildings are essentially connected to that grid. It's just then a case of building on the infrastructure that already exists. Next slide, please. So we've been doing this for a while, and we've had a number of stages. So in 2018, we released a climate positive roadmap for the built environment. And essentially that was identifying how we lay out the path towards our 2030 and 2050 climate goals, what would need to happen, who would need to make those actions. In 2020, we released Green Star Buildings. So that was the flagship rating in the Green Star suite. It had a very big revamp, and it was largely based on this climate positive roadmap. And in that, we introduced what we call the climate positive pathway. Next slide, please. So the climate positive pathway is a more holistic look at driving buildings and addressing emissions. But in particular with that, this piece of work, key to this piece of work was making buildings fossil fuel free. You will note the language. We had to kind of introduce the topic, and then we evolved the language over time from fossil fuel free over to electrification. And that was really more about people getting used to the idea that electrification is the kind of fastest and best solution. We also defined it related to space heating, domestic hot water, and cooking. So we were very clear about the systems that we were including in that definition. And then we partnered that with being highly efficient, powered by renewables, but with lower upfront carbon, and addressing remaining emissions through offsets and high quality offsets. Next page. In Green Star, we then essentially set out a series of dates at which we would increase the stringency for different star ratings. So initially, when we released the rating tool, only the 6-star world leadership buildings would need to comply with all of those outcomes. But over time, the idea is that the market becomes more comfortable with that, and so we can ask buildings going for 5 stars, eventually 4 stars, to also achieve those targets, and with the aim of that being kind of paving a pathway towards regulation and our building code. Next slide, thanks. So after that, we continued to work with the World GBC. We were a partner or a part of the Net Zero Carbon Buildings Commitment, and we had quite a large number of signatories from Australia. We then started to look at specifically the challenges with existing buildings, because there are a whole set of parameters that you need to work with in existing buildings that is different to new buildings. We then also, based on some conversations with our Net Zero Carbon Buildings Commitment signatories, established these 2 practical guides. So one is a practical guide to electrification for new buildings, and one is for existing buildings, and essentially looking at them as 2 areas that have their own kind of distinct set of challenges that you need to overcome. And it steps out all of that. So we framed it, sorry, yeah, next slide. Thank you. We framed this as essentially an engineering issue and a design issue for the building. So where in the building would you be needing to adjust your systems? And also, you know, what are the kind of design considerations that you might need to accommodate that? And initially we, aside from the 6-star buildings, we asked, if you aren't going to electrify your building, can you build in contingency for a future where a gas network no longer exists and you need to upgrade your systems to an all electric? So it was really also about making sure we were future proofing buildings. Next slide, please. We also had a case study. This one I pulled out just as a nod to the fact that this particular project, a builder actually, as part of the tender, recommended back to the client that they could actually come up with a whole bunch of improvements for the building from an efficiency and operational perspective if they electrified. So the range of opportunities in which to introduce the idea of electrification is not right at the start. It's best at the start, obviously, but you know, it can actually be introduced along the process for new buildings. Next slide, please. And then for existing buildings in particular portfolios, what we were trying to do is to establish the fact that you really need to be ready to move when you have opportunities in existing buildings to partner big upgrades of your equipment with scheduled replacement cycles or other opportunities to do capital works. So you can really just pick up and run with that when that opportunity arises, or as part of an ongoing program of upgrades that you already have across your portfolio of buildings. Next slide. And I think in terms of, in particular to that conversation around mitigation, a question that came up a lot in the early stages of this was, well, if we're chucking out all of our gas boilers and replacing it with heat pumps, isn't that a whole bunch of upfront carbon that we're wasting? And so we did some work to establish that if you paired the heat pump with renewable electricity, and even thinking about the fact you might have to upgrade that system, it's very clear that the sooner you electrify and are powered by renewables, the kind of emission savings is exponential. Next slide, please. So moving on, we also then started to see some movement from governments in Australia. So we had our national capital, their government identified a pathway to electrification, and so they're really working through what it means across a large space to roll that out. And they've created a whole bunch of resources that are definitely worth your time if you wanted to go and look for those. We then also started to think about precincts and the role that precincts had to play, a much bigger challenge in many ways and a longer transition. And so identifying what needed to happen and when and by who was also something we wanted to begin the conversation with the industry on. We also partnered with the Global CookSafe Coalition, who are a new organization in 2022 that essentially are thinking about, gas in many ways. Gas cooking is it's the gateway into a building. It's the thing that people really care about. They're not super fussed about how their hot water is heated, or if the heating in the building is working, then that's great. But the cooking is the thing that people have an emotional connection to, and this program, or the coalition, essentially were bringing in chefs that are recognizable chefs, very high class quality chefs, and making the case of why electrification and induction cooking is actually the future. We then also saw another government, essentially an entire state, outline their pathway towards closing down the gas network and having a gas substitution roadmap. So that was really exciting to see, and we worked with them on the launch of that. And then we started to think about the effects of electrifying all of our buildings. So this particular one, this paper is about how you could potentially use buildings as batteries, how to firm up the network when you're moving from dispatchable to non-dispatchable energy. And lastly, we then created just late last year, we issued a guide on how to think about this at a precinct scale in a very practical way. Next slide, please. So we now have essentially rolled that out across all of the suite of the Green Star rating tools. So that's for new and existing buildings, individual homes, buildings in operation, communities, and we're just currently working now on the fit outs piece. But it's just it's a foundational part now of our entire rating tool system. Next slide, please. And then lastly, just to say that we're continuing this work looking at how we, consequential challenges because of the move to electrification. So it's not a silver bullet. The more heat pumps we install in buildings, the more refrigerants we're going to be reliant on, and refrigerants are their own kettle of fish in terms of challenges that we need to address. And so we're starting to talk to industry about what the future of refrigerants look like in an all-electric building, but also in comparison to the phase down that those chemicals are being subjected to. So this is a discussion paper, and we'll sort of continue to work with industry on that. But that is a very quick summary of the work we've been doing over the last few years. And yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Taryn. That was an incredibly rich overview of the work that you and the team at GBCA have been doing, and thank you for sharing so many fantastic resources. Our team can certainly give a link in the chat to our attendees so they can find some of those incredible suite of publications that you've just shown. And also, I'll add to your note that you had on the slide that you guys are looking for industry feedback for this paper on refrigerants. So please get in touch with Taryn and her team if that's something that you can contribute to. But Taryn, thank you for now. We'll come back to you in a wee minute when we're ready for our panel discussion. But for now, it's my pleasure to introduce Jan Quint from Siemens. Jan, over to you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about our collaboration with the University of East London and to help them to become net zero by 2030. Next slide, please. So I want to start with my energy level on working together with universities, because what happens on campus shapes what's possible beyond it, right? So universities are in a unique position in the world because they not only operate big campuses that are sometimes or even very often very old buildings and combined with very new buildings, but they also shape the future of the next generation of engineers, for example. So the next generation of engineers, they tackle the challenges to our kind of problem we have to become net zero. And they should be educated to embed the technology that is out there already. And I think that was mentioned before. There is technology out there already, but the scalability is one of the biggest problems. Beyond that, universities are also in the need of developing the new groundbreaking technologies that continues to mitigate some of those problems. So this is why universities are very much unique. So shaping the future in terms of research, shaping the future in terms of education, but at the same time being bold on walking the talk, yeah? So universities should live the value of sustainability. They are embedded into cities. They sometimes are like small cities, yeah? So they should lead by example and be the testbed of new technology. Next slide, please. So when we started our partnership with the University of East London, they came to us saying, we want to be net zero by 2030, and we have a bold ambition, but we need support how to get there. So we defined 5 pillars how to help them. So first of all, and most important, was define strategic outcomes here. What exactly should be achieved? Then definitely what I mentioned before, existing infrastructure is huge in universities, and like with the University of East London. So we should look into how to embed existing infrastructure into this mission. We believe that combining the real world and the digital world is saving a lot of kind of problems that are out there, because data can tell so much about buildings and help to embed technology into buildings. Decarbonize with intelligent systems is something which came up already. Electrification, and nowadays definitely something which is kind of around the corner already there is AI and analytics. So we at Siemens are talking a lot to our customers about how can we as Siemens help you to embed AI and analytics into your systems. So we're not driving into a smart sustainable campus, but our vision is more into, hey, how to build an autonomous campus, making their own clever decisions based on certain KPIs. So the KPI that University of East London had was should save an enormous amount of CO2 annually. And at the moment, we're delivering up to 1,000 tons less of CO2. One thing that always comes up is, hey, investing into sustainability efforts is costing money. And we are a true believer that that's not true. True is that it's unlocking so much cost savings in terms of technology helping to reduce the amount of money you need to spend for energy, for example. And at the end of the day, it's also delivering to the goal of net zero campus by 2030. What we did was we installed not only, and next slide, please. We not only installed the very, let's say, low-hanging fruits like LED replacement or solar panels, but what we did lately was we installed the UK biggest source heat pump using the River Thames for generating heat and that and electricity. So this is a groundbreaking kind of technology that we helped to shape the University of East London's mission to become net zero by 2030, right? And I want to praise two people, and these people tell a lot about what the aspiration looks like. One is the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. He said, London is leading the way in fighting against climate change. And projects like this pioneering partnership between University of East London and Siemens are key to our city's transition to a greener, more sustainable future. And UEL Vice Chancellor and President of UEL, Amanda Broddick, said, we are committed to driving forward sustainable innovation that not only reduces our environmental impact, but also creates a living laboratory for the next generation of climate leaders. I think these two phrases are saying and telling a lot about why universities are in the forefront of driving technology change. They are test bed for new technologies, yeah, and even thinking about not having a laboratory on a university, but making the university a laboratory. So embedding students into everyday technology that drives this mission is really important. It's important because it's feeding our future talent pipeline. It's feeding the way that our future engineers or leaders are thinking about green economy. And it also helps for groundbreaking research. So being an end-to-end kind of solution on sustainability from research, education, future talent pipeline, but also embedding this technology into the campus. This is where Siemens stands for as an end-to-end solution. Next slide, please. And as I said before, a living lab turns a campus into a launchpad for learning. This is very, very important to say. Yeah, we don't need to wait for more breakthrough technology. There's a lot of technology already exists that can make a big difference. For example, this heat pump, this can be scalable throughout the community even. So not just for the campus, but for the whole community where the University of East London is in. And at the end of the day, universities need to be in the forefront of this. Local community, city like London or other cities, country, and a lot of universities' output is embedded into country objectives to become net zero or more greener. For example, in United Arab Emirates, UAE, They say, we want to celebrate exporting the last barrel of oil by 2049, and universities are key to shape the way through it by embracing new technologies and building the next level of leaders that drive this future. So this is why universities are so important on the one hand, but also very much a kind of mission we're all on together with Siemens and myself and my energy and power to help them to become, at the end of the day, delivering on the promise and delivering on the huge burden they're on. That's it from my end.
Thanks so much, Jan, for that fantastic case study and for bringing the story of the University of East London to life for us. Thank you so much. I'm look forward to hearing more from you in the discussion later. I mean, on a personal level, I'm based in London, so is Maria, who we're about to hear from next. And I remember when the water source heat pump was going through planning 10 years ago, maybe. It was legendary even then as an incredible idea. So it's fantastic to see it come full circle and be presenting this amazing business case. But we will come back to that. This is what our discussion is for. And a quick reminder to those of you who are joining us live today here, if you have any questions for our speakers, please do put them in the chat box or the Q&A just now, and we will pick them up when we move over to the panel discussion in a few minutes' time. But for now, last but certainly not least, let me hand over to Maria Fernandez from Multiplex to share the story of Multiplex's journey. Thanks, Maria.
Thank you very much for the intro, Katrina, and thank you for having me. Next slide, please. Yeah, that's good. I'm delighted to join you all today to tell you about Multiplex's investment in a net zero transition and our power purchase agreement with additionality. Next slide, please. I just wanted to start with a really brief introduction to Multiplex. Established in Australia over 60 years ago, we are a premier construction company with a very simple purpose: to construct a better future. We are known globally for shaping skylines and delivering iconic projects around the world, operating in Australia, Canada, the UK, and formerly in the Middle East as well. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, our purpose is simple, and that is to construct a better future. We acknowledge that what we are good at, constructing buildings, can also make the world better. This is why we look at how we can better harness opportunities for our people, our communities, and the wider industry to achieve their full potential. Next slide, please. And all of that is reflected in how we look at ESG at Multiplex. ESG is embedded in our operations. In the UK, from a sustainability point of view, we look at climate action in the shape of our 1 Decade to Act that I will be telling you about shortly, but also mindful of the carbon panel vision and the influence we have, for example, over air quality, biodiversity, and water. We look after our people and those who come to work to our sites, but also the communities where we operate and the business opportunities that we can bring to the local communities. Last but not least, for years, we have been working to tackle modern slavery in the construction industry, and our ethical labor management system forms a key part of our governance structure. Next slide, please. If you have joined this webinar, it's very likely that I don't have to tell you much about the difference between 2 and 1.5 degrees of global warming and why the time to act is now. But what I want to tell you is what we are doing towards climate action. I would also like to mention that Multiplex Europe was the first contractor in the world to have an approved science-based target in line with 1.5 degrees pathway. Compared to our 2017 baseline, we have achieved a 95% reduction in our Scope 1 and 2 emissions and a 63% reduction in our Scope 3 emissions. Next slide, please. For the last 5 years, we have had our carbon data verified in line with ISO 14064. This is last year's data, but more or less the proportion is similar year upon year. Our Scope 1 represents a tiny bit of our emissions, well under 1%, and the same for our Scope 2, with the majority of our emissions coming from our supply chain, Scope 3. When we look at the graph on the right-hand side, the embodied carbon of the materials that we use in our projects represents the majority of our emissions, and the projected use of the buildings that we complete is the other largest chunk. Our data inform our decarbonization roadmap, and of course, we had to tackle our own emissions, but mostly our supply chain emissions. Next slide, please. In 2021, we launched One Decade to Act, our decarbonization roadmap. One Decade to Act details the actions that we will be focusing on this decade to make sure we are net zero by 2050 at the latest. There are 5 key action areas: zero on-site emissions by 2025. And before someone asks me the questions, we will be publishing a report in September with an update on how we have done against all these areas, so please watch this space. Goal 2, 50% reduction in embodied carbon intensity by 2030, net zero building operations carbon by 2030, net zero emissions from transport by 2030, and zero avoidable waste by 2030. As you can see, within those action areas, there are a number of things which are directly under our control, but there are also some goals that rely on deep industry collaboration with our clients and with our supply chain. Maybe at this point you are wondering if I have lost the focus of my presentation to speak to you about our PPA, but I haven't. One of the things that we believe as a business is to walk the talk. If you recall my previous slide, our scope 1 and 2 emissions are less than 1%, but they are under direct control. Therefore, tackling those emissions is key for us to be able to influence others to follow suit. And this is why we committed to our power purchase agreement with additionality. Go to the next slide, please. Why a power purchase agreement with additionality to supply electricity to our sites? The UK Green Building Council published a report in 2021 that was then updated in 2023 that highlighted the principles for renewable energy procurement. Principle number 1, renewable. Principle number 2, additionality. Just in case, I will clarify what additionality means, but basically a company is responsible for financially supporting new renewable generation sources as opposed to buying into what already exists or is planned or available. In this case, for us, it was a solar farm contributing to decarbonizing the grid. Next slide, please. On the 1st of April 2025, we became the first and only contractor in the UK with our own solar farm to power our construction sites. The site is located in Norfolk in the UK, and it covers a total area of 19 hectares, which is equivalent to 26 football pitches. We have 16,480 solar panels installed, expected to produce around 10 megawatt-hours of electricity annually. This is a 15-year-long commitment and partnership with Empire Solar Europe, who developed the farm. If I put it like this, it all sounds very simple. However, the journey from the solar farm started in 2021, when we first built the business case around it. And in November 2021, during COP26, we announced that we had executed the term sheet for a PPA with additionality, and we expected it to be live in Q1 2023, so 2 years earlier. However, we did not anticipate the number of challenges: geopolitical instability and the cost of electricity, the size of the solar farm, making it small for some plots of land and other development projects, the availability to connect a solar farm to the grid, which now has waits amounting to several years, planning conditions, and many more. I can actually not take the credit for this fantastic project, but I wanted to mention Tushan Suri, our former head of sustainable design at Multiplex, and Tom Mark, one of our regional directors in the UK, who led on this over the years until it finally materialized. Next slide, please. I have mentioned the very obvious environmental benefits of our PPA by contributing to decarbonize the grid. The power generated by the PPA is equivalent to powering 4,200 homes with green energy, saving around 3,600 tons of carbon every year. But we cannot forget about the social benefits too. During the Power On event in April, I personally had the opportunity to meet the farmers who are renting the land for the solar farm. They now have a regular source of income for the next 15 years that is allowing them to diversify, invest further into their farm. As well as during construction, we supported the local community by providing local opportunities of employment. Next slide, please. It's all from me. Thank you very much for your time. Obviously, there is more than open to receive any questions from the audience, but feel free to get in touch with me if you would like to hear more. Thank you.
Maria, thank you so much. It's such a heartwarming story and amazing to see the real case study of your solar farm and the incredible environmental and social benefits it's offering. And I'm sure we'll be really looking forward to seeing the Zero Emissions by 2025 report in September when that's ready.
Perfect.
Thank you. Thanks for teeing that up for us. So to Taryn, to Jan, to Maria, thank you so much for your presentations. We now have about 20 minutes before the end of this session, so I'm going to take down these slides, and it would be great if we can transition into a panel discussion now. I'm actually going to put them back up because we've got lots of little boxes. Bear with me 1 second. That's a bit easier to see, isn't it? But please do share questions for our panelists if any come to you while you're hearing this discussion. But there's a few topics that I'd like to bring up just to tease out a few more of the key themes that we heard during your presentation. So the first area, I think, is this conversation about the business case, because all three of you touched on it in various avenues. And I think for everybody watching this conversation, there is no doubt that the different solutions that you've presented, the different publications you've shown, the different methodologies for reaching a net zero future are all incredibly valuable and impactful and scalable. But my question for you guys is, if I'm listening to you right now and I'm looking to change the mind of a decision maker, somebody holding the purse strings, how can you make a business case for electrification and for energy efficiency? And Jan, I'm going to come to you first because you gave us that fantastic stat about £500,000 a year saving in utility costs. So maybe an easy question for you, but we'll start off with you if that's okay.
Thank you for giving me that question, because it's a very important one. Speaking to a lot of our customers around the world, they're coming with a fixed mindset of saying that investing into sustainability efforts and transitioning towards net zero is costing a lot of money. When we start then to investigate how to reduce energy demand on the first hand, but on the second hand, increase the use of green energy, then it much easier comes to play that this is essentially, so sustainability is gaining efficiency on all levels, I heard. Yeah, and this also comes down then to investment and costs, where the use of energy demand, and there is huge energy efficiency gains out there. So if we talk about HVAC optimization or electrification of classrooms and turning the lights off when they're empty and using the technology to showcase this, when you're really empty and not if the timetable shows it's empty, this can make a huge difference. So using data in order to uncover these efficiency gains is hugely important. And then combine this with grants that are available from governments, from local communities, and then make a business case, and it sees that this is a kind of snowball that starts spinning the wheel. Oh, we're saving money, now we can invest into the next project. And this is where we see a lot of universities then starting to realize, oh, I can accelerate my transition rather than I'm stuck because my student enrollment isn't good enough, so I have to save money.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great point. And I love the point that you've made there about how if university or if any building owner, occupier, developer, portfolio manager is collecting this data and sharing it publicly, even if you don't have access to that yourself for your own building, it helps you build that business case through the comparability of it.
Yes, that's definitely the case. And also that data is in our mindset used to drive, an AI combined with AI to say, okay, what is going to be our energy demand tomorrow based on weather condition, based on experience on the past week, the past month, and which courses are going to run in a university sense, can help to say, okay, what is the demand, the energy peak tomorrow, and how can I tackle that, and how can I have a huge good energy mix to much more decrease my costs, or CO2. Yeah, it depends on the KPI you're having.
Thank you, Jan. There's so much more to say there, but we'll bring in our other speakers and maybe we'll come back to the topic of AI in mitigation if we have time later, because we're opening a whole box there. But Taryn, let me bring you in as well, because I'd love to hear your thoughts on how we're building a business case for energy efficiency, electrification, mitigation, and how you feel your members are achieving that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was part of the intent of releasing these practical guides. It did really step it out in a way that meant you could communicate it really easily, and each page is effectively, an idea or an argument as to why electrification makes sense. But I think in the longer term, it's looking at weighing the cost of inaction against the cost of action. So if you're not prepared for those capital works upgrades, or making sure that every new building that you're building is geared up for an all-electric future, you risk being in the part of the market that will cover or will bear the burden of the cost of essentially a dying gas network. And so just recently in one of our states, we've seen a whole region signal that within the next 18 months they will be cutting off gas supply. So you can imagine the kind of scramble that jurisdiction is going to now go through. If you are not prepared for that, you will also be part of that scramble, and you don't want to be competing against, everybody else in your neighborhood also trying to electrify, because that's not just product, it's about transitioning, the timing of that work, the availability of the people to do that work. And so planning for it is a much safer bet than just waiting to see what happens.
That's such a good point. Actually, a big part of the business case is the risk of stranding assets, is of huge costs on the other side. Thank you. Maria, I'd love to bring you in on this, because I think maybe there's nothing more compelling than somebody who's done it themselves in terms of building a business case. Do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, sure. I think for us, it's like, particularly in the UK, it's very much linked to the pricing structure for electricity. And it's quite interesting because that is one of the biggest challenges for the UK to achieve their net zero carbon targets. For everyone in the webinar who is not in the UK and is listening in, the UK's current electricity pricing structure is heavily influenced by gas prices. So that means that when gas prices are high, electricity prices also rise. And whilst it incentivizes energy efficiency, it actually creates a disincentive for consumers and businesses to switch to electricity-based solutions. So it's very common to see in the BBC news about the transition to heat pumps, and how it's actually very challenging for domestic owners in particular to make that transition, because there is the right thing to do. Their cost in their bills could go up, and so making the business case there for them, despite the grants, is very difficult. So in a way, it's hindering the transition to a low carbon energy system. However, it also represents a huge opportunity, and that's what happened to us as a business when we were looking at the volatility of electricity prices. The PPA includes a long-term price security that reduces that risk associated with electricity prices changing. So at the time when we were doing the PPA analysis, and I mentioned this started in 2020, 2021, it was, if you think about what was happening then, we had the beginning of the war in Ukraine. And so you can guess how those adverse geopolitical movements were leading on the energy crisis. Also, high inflation has been hitting the UK market for some time. But by being able to negotiate the PPA, we are having very significant savings in the cost of electricity year on year. And also, what I would like to say is we work with blue chip clients repeatedly, and they have their own decarbonization strategies. So our PPA contributes to our site emissions, which are assessed under whole life carbon under stage A5. And this has become one of our unique selling points, with one project in particular where the feedback from the client upon the project award was that we had won that project because of the PPA. So despite the challenges and the contradictions of the electricity pricing model, the business case was very clear for us.
Thank you, Maria. We've had a question which is directed at Jan. So we'll start at Jan now, and just to broaden out this business case question, because this is building on what you were just saying, Maria, about what a difficult time it's been over the last few years to build this business case because of the challenges in the international and geopolitical system and the economy that we've all been facing. So this question was to Jan, but after that I'll open it to Maria and Taryn as well. But Jan, you've been asked if you can briefly talk about the economy of green building, especially on the real estate market. Is that something you can comment on?
Yes, from a university perspective, universities are thinking more in decades and not into quarters. So that makes investment decisions more predictable on the one hand. On the other hand, as I said before, when we talk about efficiency gains and green energy, it's a lot about or convincing the board to buy into. And when we did a project in Oman, I think a couple of years ago, there was resistance from the board in the early phase. But when we then showed the clear path into the return on investment is within 4 or 5 years, then it was immediately a no-brainer to sign. And this is where the rubber hits the road. Yeah, as soon as that the investment is clear and the return on investment is clear, based on all the factors I was saying, energy savings, increasing green energy, but also using funds that are available across the globe and in certain economies and in certain countries, that makes the real business case. And then is where the board of a university is making that bold decision. And obviously, as I said, they're more looking at 2 decades, yeah, because they're making this decision about building a new building based on real facts. That's one thing. And the other thing is we have solutions that talks about space optimization, so that we predict the real occupancy level of existing buildings. And it's nothing more frustrating than a time schedule is showing the building is occupied, you don't have space, and you walk around, there's lots of space. This is what universities telling us every day, which is a huge frustration. So what we're doing is to say, okay, let's collect real data and then see if building a new building is necessary in the first place, or if not, buildings could be repurposed, right?
Absolutely.
It gives a bit of an insight into how, from a university perspective, they look into that factor.
And I love that mirroring of the short term, the immediacy of the need for data collection now in real time, mixed with the long term thinking. It's that dual perspective, isn't it, that's so important. Thank you. Taryn or Maria, if you want to jump in on that, please do. But otherwise, I'd love to bring up a topic that I think all three of you touched on a bit. And Taryn, I'll come to you first, if that's okay, because you gave us the great example of the Global CookSafe Coalition and the work they're doing to tackle the cultural barrier about gas cooking or the cultural barrier to electric cooking, rather, the fact there's such an emotional connection to gas building. It's to gas and wood cooking. It's so emotionally entrenched in society and culture in so many parts of the world. And that opens up this broader question around what some of the barriers are to mitigation, because we've seen really compelling case studies, business cases, but it would be great, I think, to hear some words from you on what some of the challenges are in terms of this transition to an all-electric, highly efficient future, and how we overcome them. And Taryn, I'll start with you, if I may.
Yeah, I mean, I think taking that CookSafe Coalition example, I think on average, cooking gas in a commercial building is about 4% of the use, right? So it's a very marginal thing, but building that in for the cooking essentially gives you a license to, you may as well put gas in the rest of the building. And so absolutely, we saw this as it's really about winning hearts and minds. And the vast work that the CookSafe Coalition have done is to essentially establish that electrification and induction cooking, there are benefits to it beyond just the environmental and emissions impact. So commercial kitchens, they're quieter, they're easier to clean, they're more space efficient. There's a whole bunch of reasons why going from gas to induction cooking makes sense, especially in hospitality. But there is a transition, and it is working with a lot of businesses potentially that are quite small operators. And so the role of the building owner in that instance is to kind of, the barrier there is availability of even just, if a small business is going in and having to fully change the way that they operate, they need support. They can't do that on their own. And so the role of a building owner is to really bring them along that journey and work with them on how they can, upskill, transition. So I think that is a particular piece of advocacy has been really important to shift people's ideas. And I will say that, the emissions piece is kind of it's people understand it, but it's a very kind of loose concept in their minds. Whereas if you talk about health and safety and the kind of direct benefits, that resonates a lot more strongly. So it's about putting it in the terms that people need to understand rather than, so communication can also essentially be a barrier.
Erin, thank you. That's such a good point. If we had another hour, I'd love to dive into this in so much more detail. But let me hand over to Maria if there's anything you'd like to add.
Probably the only thing I could say is that I completely with Taryn has just said. Obviously, as a construction company, we have a very diverse portfolio of the projects that we construct, and what we see is like sometimes when we think about that understanding about the benefits of sustainability, when we go through value engineering, something that does not always get prioritized and considered is that what brings a benefit to the sustainable operation of the building. What we see like in the UK and particularly more within London, they are certainly driving that net zero transition and more stringent regulations through the planning policy. We saw the launch of the UK net zero carbon building standard, the pilot in September last year, which is designed in line with 1.5 and trying to, setting limits for energy use, maximum limits for upfront carbon, for operational energy, fossil fuel use. So all those things are sort of like limiting the options of being able to drive away from the benefits of sustainability and just about my identity. But I think like we've all spoken about the business case and the fact that it's clear. So I think that is also becoming more clear for businesses.
Thanks, Maria. And just while I've got you, I want to bring in one more thing in the last minute, because I know this is something that you have expertise in, but talking barriers, but talking hearts and minds, how we bring in people, making it more than a business case. How do we tie this into the conversation about just transition and the wider community benefit that you talked about, Jan talked about, Taryn talked about? How do we do that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Massive question for you.
I know. I don't think we have enough time to cover this one, but it's something that I'm passionate about. Is we can, I mentioned it in one of my first slides, we cannot just look at the environmental benefit without looking at the social benefit. Obviously, for a construction company, it's very challenging. Nobody likes having a construction site on the other side of the road from their house. So automatically, when you see it, it's like, oh, this is going to be terrible. But what we can do is like actually opening the doors of that construction site to the community. So it's all about bringing them on board, providing local opportunities for employment, linking with social businesses. And I mentioned it's very important for us looking after the people who are working for us, understanding their conditions of work, because sometimes we shouldn't just focus on the final glossy final product, the completed building, but it's like everything throughout the journey. And what we are seeing as well is there is those opportunities for apprentices, like in the UK now, because the university costs are quite steep and people get in debt. It's like now people are leaning towards as well going through that apprenticeship where you are getting qualified as you are working. And there is that misconception about the variety of roles that the built environment industry can provide. So it's like having that communication and that openness and being able to bring the whole society on board is very important for us.
Maria, thank you. You're right. This is something to take so much further. And actually, World GBC have an area that we're looking to explore more, just transition. And that's something we're going to be building into our plans for next year. So stay tuned and we'll bring back this discussion and give it the time that it deserves. Jan, do you want to say anything just to wrap us up and a quick closing remark from you on this topic of just transition and how it ties into mitigation?
Yeah, two things here from my perspective of looking after universities is bringing the students into this transition. One professor said CO2 is not visible, but a board on the wall saying how much energy we save today, that is making it visible. And then the transition into the real world examples, even if it's a construction site across the road, makes then it much more tangible. Yeah, that's one thing. And the other thing is use universities as a test bed of new technology is very important. And universities are desperate with collaborations with industry, and this could be really bold for the communities they serve, but also for the countries and for everyone's purpose.
Thank you, Jan. And I think there's a really beautiful message that's come out of all three of you about taking the very scientific, the very environmental messaging about emissions, about electrification, about energy efficiency, and really humanizing it. And I think that's a lovely message to close our session today. So I just want to thank our speakers so much. Taryn, Jan, Maria, thank you for your time in preparing for today, for joining us live, and for engaging in this discussion with us. We really appreciate your expertise and your time today. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
A quick word from me. Thank you. A quick word from me before we head off. Sorry, I'm talking over us now, run out of time, but just before we go, everybody, a couple of words from me. As we are on the way to COP30, you can get involved in our Be Bold on Buildings campaign by being part of our business action statement. If you look at the QR code on screen, you can scan that, sign up and support the business action statement, which is calling on COP30 negotiators for drastic action in advance of that radically important climate conference in November. So please do be part of that if you can. Also, do make sure you keep an eye on our social media channels. The next webinar in our Building to COP series will take place on the 27th of August, and that will be about resilience. So hopefully we will see you again then. But for now, thank you very, very much to everyone who's joined us live. I hope the session's been helpful for you today. Thank you again to our speakers, and we'll see you at the next session. Thank you very much, and goodbye.